Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads on July 12th. Before we get into the books portion of this video, there's a couple of more personal things or reactions to events kind of things that I want to do first. First of all, I want to thank everybody for their kind words and well wishes and inquiries about Hurricane Beryl, which did come through Sunday, Monday, but not here. So we thought for a long time, it did look like it was going to be a hit in Corpus Christi, and the city took preparations and we took preparations and everybody got ready. And then on the day before, we could see that it was changing course, and it actually didn't hit us at all. It rained for about 10 minutes and that was it. It wasn't even windy. So it was kind of strange because there was so much nervous tension, and then it wasn't even a tropical storm here. It was just nothing at all. But it moved up north and it actually hit Houston pretty hard, and they are still suffering with widespread power outages, and it has been in the mid to upper 90s all week. It's been extremely hot and humid with heat indexes of like 110. So that is just a miserable situation for the people there who are still without electricity. And because it's widespread in certain pockets of town, some of those people, they have to travel a long way to get to any kind of a cooling center or a store that's open. So it's just a mess. But I'm grateful here, but I feel bad for those people in Houston and in that surrounding area. The other thing I want to talk about before we get into books is the revelations that came out this week about Alice Munro. This morning when I was having breakfast, I watched Lindy's video from Lindy's Magpie Reads, and I will put her video in the notes below because she has a really thoughtful discussion about it that's probably much more erudite than mine will be, but I've been just thinking and trying to process this all week, and I wanted to say something on my video as well. And I've been talking about this with Stephen and also some of my other bookish friends, and we've exchanged some articles. So I'm going to put a couple of articles that I thought were particularly, impactful to me, also in the notes. So if you want to explore this topic further, you will have those resources. And if you've missed this story, let me just sum it up. Alice Munro, the Canadian author, primarily of short stories, who died a few months ago. I talked about her on the channel. I've talked about her frequently on the channel because she is one of my favorite short story writers. And she's a winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. But a story came out this week. It was a piece in the Toronto Star written by her youngest daughter, Andrea Skinner. Andrea Skinner reveals that her stepfather, Alice Munro's second husband, sexually abused her as a child for several years, from the age of 9 until she reached her teens, and that her family did absolutely nothing to end this or to support her. And the story is shocking and horrible in quite a few ways. First of all, so Alice Munro and her first husband divorced. They had 3 children. The children were living primarily with the father, and he remarried, and his new wife also brought in a 4th child. So there was 4 children, but Munro's children would come and spend time with him in the summer. So the first summer that she is remarried, 9-year-old Andrea goes for the summer, and this man sexually abuses her. I won't go into the specific details, but they are in most of the articles. And then she goes home, tells her family, and they do exactly nothing. Her father does not confront the abuser. He doesn't confront his ex-wife. He doesn't do anything except next summer, he sends her back there with another sister and says, keep an eye on the situation. But it just simmered in the family. Nobody addressed it. She was gaslighted into thinking this was something that you could just kind of stop referring to, overlook, get past it. And when she reached her 20s, she decided to finally talk to her mother about it. She wrote her a long letter, and Munro, her reaction is so heartbreakingly disappointing. she basically responds to Andrea as if some woman had come to her to say she had an affair with her husband. She briefly left him for a few days, went and stayed at one of her other properties, and then she decides that she's just going to stick with her husband, and that Andrea's information is just kind of inconvenient to her because she's in love with her husband. So she chose her husband over her child. She fails to protect her child. And this is one of the most inexcusable crimes, I mean, an actual crime and a crime against nature and decency that I can possibly imagine. And this, the overall complete failure of this family to support Andrea Skinner as a child and as an adult, I just can't even, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how awful this is. And the other kids got gaslighted too. I mean, they grew up, kind of being told, oh, something happened, but it's okay. And now they're taking work together as a group to reconnect and to heal together, because Andrea finally had to just cut these people off and just leave the toxic environment. On the occasion of the death of her mother, Andrea decided that now is the time to make sure that everybody knows about this. So she put out this piece, and then all the reactions have come in. And yeah, so that's where I'm at, trying to process this horrible story. I don't know, it's just terrible. If you ask me right now, I mean, some people are talking about rereading stories in light of this, but I don't know that that's really a reading lens that I want to apply to think about the monstrous events that were happening in this household while she was writing these stories. I don't know if that's something. I don't know if I'm going to read any of these stories ever again, or even if I'm going to keep these books on my shelves. So I don't know. If you have thoughts on this, go ahead and put them in the comments, or watch Lindy's video, read these articles. I just had to say something. I couldn't just pass the week and not mention this piece of news, because it's been sitting heavy on me this week, and I've been thinking about it a lot. But let's shift gears. We're going to pivot now and talk about the things I usually talk about on Friday. So TV shows. We watched the 3rd season of The Bear. Kind of disappointing. I had heard reviews that said it was sort of disappointing, and I thought, oh, maybe they just wanted it to be funnier, blah blah blah. Well, it really was. It was kind of a bummer. There was a couple of standout episodes, but overall, I don't know. I'm wondering what they're gonna do. I've heard season 4 will be the last. I'm curious to see what they do with that. Love those characters. Did not love this particular season. And last night we watched the first episode of Dark Matter, which is based on the novel by Blake Crouch, which I have read, but Stephen hasn't. So we watched the first episode, and for me it was sort of, oh yeah, I kind of remember that this is what's going on. And for him, he was just had no clue what was going on, because it's really confusing if you don't sort of know. And that's, the book's like that too. At first you have to wait and get your bearings. So I'll say more about it next week as we move along, and so I don't really have a review yet. Okay, let's talk about books. The first book that I read in the past week was not entirely a success, but I reread Candide by Voltaire. And I read it for my banned book club at the public library, which will be meeting on Wednesday to discuss this book. And I cannot wait to find out how the other people in this group fared with this book. Now, for me, I read this back in not high school. I read it in college, and I had my college copy with my little annotations. And the funny thing is, my memory told me that I enjoyed this book when I read it back in college. But my notes reveal, the notes abruptly trail off in about the same spot that I got frustrated with the book on the reread. So now I'm suspicious of 1980s Angelia, and whether or not she too speed read through part of the middle of the book and then read the conclusion, because that's what I did this time. This book was published in 1759. One of the events that figures prominently, and it would have been a recent event, which was the giant earthquake in Lisbon, Portugal in 1755. And that's just one of the many disasters that occurs in this book. So this is a story about a young man named Candide who is a ward in the household of the Baron. Hold on, he has kind of a joke name. Sounds like somebody from Rocky and Bullwinkle. The Baron von Thunder Tintronk. Has a bunch of hyphens in it. He lives in this castle, and he feels that he is in Westphalia, and he feels like he's in the most wonderful place imaginable. He receives lessons from the tutor Pangloss, who believes that they live in the best of all possible worlds, and he is in love with the beautiful young lady, the Baron's daughter, with this name that I really cannot pronounce, that appears to be Cunegonde. And so at the beginning of the story, he and Cunegonde kind of pair up, and he gets kicked out of the castle. And that is a funny scene that I enjoy at the beginning of the book. Let me just share a little bit of this. And this gives you a hint of the humor that's in this book, although it did begin to wear thin, and I'll get to that in a minute. She ran into Candide as she entered the castle and blushed. Candide blushed in turn. She bade him good day in a faltering voice, and Candide answered without knowing what he was saying. The next day after dinner, as everyone was leaving the table, Cunegonde and Candide found themselves behind the screen. Cunegonde dropped her handkerchief. Candide picked it up. Innocently, she took his hand in hers. Innocently, the young man kissed the lady's hand, doing so with a singular vivacity, sensibility, and grace. Their lips met. Their eyes blazed. Their knees trembled. Their hands strayed. His Excellency the Baron von Thundertentronk happened to be passing near the screen, and observing this cause and that effect, chased Candide out of the castle with great kicks to his backside. Cunegonde fainted. As soon as she came to her senses, she had her face slapped by the Baroness, and all was consternation in the most beautiful and delightful of possible castles. Well, this gives a sense that we're going to have kind of a romp, but it kind of takes a dark turn because the book is a series of never-ending horrible disasters, and they're kind of played for laughs and breezily described, but it is deaths and murders and tortures and rapes and pillaging and fires and disease, despair, shipwrecks. I mean, every possible natural and human-caused disaster occurs to Candide and his friends in the course of the book as he travels the world. He reunites and gets separated, and reunites and gets separated from his true love and his teacher and some friends. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So at first, it's kind of funny, and the philosophical jokes and the poking fun at institutions of the time. But then I got to about page 40 or 45, and I thought, oh, they're just going to keep coming up with new disasters and people that they meet that go, oh, you think you've got it bad? Let me tell you my story. And so it just goes on and on and on in a short book. This is the theme this week, short books that felt long. Just going to tell you now. So, and finally, it gets to the end. So it started out well, and then I just got bogged down in it, and I didn't really find it funny, the type of horrendous personal events that were happening to people that they sort of presented in a comedic form. It just wasn't funny. So that was my take on Candide. It was kind of a Candide, to be honest. All right, so then the next book I read was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This was a buddy read with Michael Clark. I've been wanting to read this for a while. It's been on my cart for several months. Stephen read it earlier, a few months ago, and he was kind of lukewarm on it. He liked it, didn't love it, I think, and he said, I'm not really sure what to make of this. So that was not the most blazing endorsement going in, but I had heard some really strong reviews on BookTube that sounded interesting, even though it didn't really sound exactly like my kind of book. This kind of very meditative, contemplative book that is not really, it is a novel, but not exactly, because nothing really happens. There's no plot. I'll just tell you there's no plot. And I'm kind of telling this review out of order, but I'm going to cut to the chase and then give the details. As I liked it. I found it interesting. I love some of the passages, but I did not love this book overall. It had some problems for me. All right, so it is a very short book, and it is about 6 astronauts on the International Space Station, and it is one day in their lives. They orbit, not rotate, but they orbit the Earth 16 times in every 24-hour period. And there's a rhythm in the book, and I really liked that. Like the idea, there's rhythms to and routines in their daily lives. There's the rhythm of their orbit and what the Earth looks like as they move around and across, each that's not a revolution, is it? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but they go around and they see a continuing pattern of sights, and they have routines on the craft, and then there's meditative thoughts. We get a little glimpses into each of the 6 people. That's what I really liked, is that sense of the rhythms and the time that we spend with each of the 6 people, and how it zooms into that minutia and then it zooms back out. It's the zoom out parts that kind of lose me. There's a whole lot in this book about what we're seeing if we're looking through the window of the space station and we're looking at the Earth. And at first it's a little dazzling, but honestly, it gets a little old after you have passed by the same thing many, many times and it's been described in extreme detail over and over. Also, my other problem with this book is that there are some specific points or themes that Samantha Harvey wants to make, which revealed to me why it ended up on the Orwell long list for political fiction. And she couldn't just let the book lead you to these thoughts. Like her descriptions of the humans and the Earth and some of the tensions, the fact that they're from different countries and that their countries try to impose these arbitrary rules on what happens in the space station, and nobody follows them because they're just a group of people. And but she feels the need to make specific comments about the human condition on Earth several times in a row. Like she wants to make sure you didn't miss the point that she wants to make about the Earth's permanence and its fragility and the human role in that. Just if she took out the several paragraphs where she hammered the point home, and she just let everything else that she showed tell that story, I think most readers would be able to come to that conclusion without having it spelled out. So I felt that was clunky. I felt like the book had a lot of beauty in the writing, and that making those points in a more subtle and indirect manner would have more power to me. That was my problem with Orbital. The other problem is, as with Candide, it was very short and it didn't feel very short. I got about 3/4 of the way through and I thought, okay, there's still more. So I loved all the bits about weightlessness, about what that is like and what that does to your body and how you acclimate to it. Everything about the individual people, their backstories, their hopes, their reasons that they love being in space. All of that was wonderful. And some of the descriptions of Earth, then it just kind of got laid on too thick. So that was my uneven experience reading Orbital by Samantha Harvey. So that brings me to what I'm currently reading. I'm reading Sense and Sensibility, which is a reliable delight. It is much longer than those other 2 books, but it doesn't feel like it because I love just going into that world and hanging out in it. We have Myriam and Eleanor, 2 sisters representing sense and sensibility. Eleanor is the older sister. She's the sense. She's calm. She's collected. She's rational. Even when she receives the most unfortunate pieces of news about the man she's in love with, she keeps it together, thinks it through. And then she has her younger sister, Myriam, who's the sensibility. She's passionate. She's emotional. She doesn't restrain herself very well. She has mood swings. She runs out of rooms crying, and she's 17. So it's very age appropriate. I'm not going to say too much more about it since I'm not finished, but next week I'll give like my overall review of my reread of Sense and Sensibility. But I'm enjoying it very much. Also, I am reading a book I cannot discuss at this time, which is Wellness by Nathan Hill. This is the last book that I am reading for BookTube prize judging, and I'll be ranking the 6 books after I finish reading this. And I only just started. It's a long book. It's about 600 pages, and I'm 143 pages in. So I will be sharing my review of that around August 1st. And last but not least, I'm still reading Creep. I have about 2 essays left to read. I am enjoying it. I'm not reading it slowly because I don't like it. It's just Myriam Gurba, her writing is strong and sharp and really intense. It's like you would not eat an entire dark chocolate torte in one sitting, or it would just be too much. You want a piece, and then you want to let that one settle, and then you want to come back and have some more on another day. So when I get to the end, I'll give an overall review and talk about my favorite essays in the collection. So we have a pretty reready week coming up. After I finish Sense and Sensibility, I'm going to be starting a reread of Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. This is part of the Get Ready for Elizabeth's New Book project. Read the Lucy Barton books, and now I'm going to be reading the Olive books, and Michael Clark and I are going to read this together starting on Monday, thereabouts. And I have pre-ordered my copy of Tell Me, I always get this wrong, is it Tell Me Anything or Tell Me Everything? I'll put it up on the screen. Her new book that's coming out early September. I can't wait. And also I need to read The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare for the Bard Room discussion. I haven't started that yet either. So that'll also be a reread. So that's what I have read. That's what's coming up. Have you read these books? Do you have thoughts on them? What was your top book this week, or what are you going to read this weekend? And anything you want to chime in and say about the Alice Munro scandal, the situation that was revealed. Other than that, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.